Welcome to the case study of scheduling police officers in police department. The police department in the US also uses scheduling techniques to designate and schedule police officers in various zones of their jurisdiction. So let us look at a detailed case study of how they go about doing this. So, what does a typical workday look like for a US police officer? The US police officer arrives at work at the beginning of his or her shift and receives the keys and the patrol car from the officer who used it on the previous shift. The officer then drives around a designated geographic area which has been assigned to him or her. Now, when the police officer receives a call from the police dispatcher, he responds to the call and performs whatever police work is required. It can be an arrest or a first aid requirement or breaking up a fight or taking a crime report and so on. Now, as soon as the officer is finished with handling the call, he or she resumes the patrol activity and is ready to respond to another call. So, if we scrutinize this work day in detail, the question that comes to our mind is, how are the designated geographic areas assigned to the police officers? Next is, how do we assign various shifts to the police officers and on which days? So a police department would need police officers 24/7, that is 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. So how are the shifts assigned to the officers? Also, how does the call system work? So when somebody calls the police department, what happens and how does that work? And how does the police dispatcher know which police officer to assign to which call? So let us look at each of these in detail. Let me draw a typical jurisdiction of the police department. So let's assume that this is the area coming under the jurisdiction of a particular police department. Now let's say that this jurisdiction is comprised of 4 towns. So let me draw a hypothetical boundary for these 4 towns. So let's say this line represents the boundary. Again, it's a hypothetical boundary, not necessary that the boundaries will have square shapes. So this is the first town, second town, third town, and the fourth town. Now, within this jurisdiction, there will be some roads. So let me draw some roads. So let's say there is a highway, and then there are roads around it. So these represent the roads in the jurisdiction. So the black line represents the roads and the dotted red line represents the town boundary. Now let's say that this part is town A, this part here is town B, this part is town C, and this is town D. So now the question is, how would the police department determine how many patrol cars or officers need to be designated in which area? So let's say that you go by the town boundary and you place one officer each in each of these towns. But what if in this town there is no crime at all, but in this town, that is D, there are 5 murders reported each day? So the workload of the officer who is designated in this area, that is town D, is not the same as the workload of the officer designated in town A. So in order to find out how many officers would be appropriate for each area, what the police departments do is that they track the calls received from the citizens. So for each hour of the day, the department notes down the number and type of calls received. The type of calls could be calls reporting theft of a car, or calls reporting heart attack, or calls reporting fights which are in progress. Then it is determined how much time a particular call takes, and they can be handled by one officer or not, and whether they'll need 2 or perhaps even more. Now after receiving these calls, you'll start analyzing these calls by listing them by day and by the hour of the day. Now these calls need to be analyzed by each day and each hour, because some days like Saturday and Sunday may be more prone to crime or less prone to crime as compared to other days. So a typical analysis of these calls may look something like this. So let's say we take Monday and we take the first shift, which is from, let's say, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So during that time, let's say you received 5 calls from town A reporting murders, 10 calls from town B reporting car theft, 3 calls from town C reporting small fights, and no calls from the town D. Similarly, you'll note down for the next shift and so on. So the next shift may be 4 p.m. to midnight, and you will list down the calls received during this time. So after analyzing this information, the police department will say, region A and B are much more prone to crime than regions C and D. So based on this, then they'll further analyze as to within region A and B, where are these calls getting reported? Are these calls all coming from a small area which is here, or are these calls scattered around the whole town? And then based on that analysis, and depending on where the calls are coming from, they may divide this town into multiple zones. So this could be zone 1A, this could be 2A, this 3A, and this 4A. And then based on these zones, then the police department will designate one patrol car in region 1A, one in region 2A, and so on. Similarly, based on the analysis for town D, they may say that okay, we only need two zones here because this town is less prone to crime. So this may be 1D and the other one 2D. So after deciding how many patrol cars are needed for which zone at what times of the day, the next question comes, which officer should be assigned to these zones and for which shift? So in order to achieve this, a workforce schedule needs to be prepared for each of the officers. Some officers may be on vacation, some may not be feeling well, so they may be on sick leave, and some may be out for some other personal reasons. So what the department will do is that they'll prepare a schedule which will look something like this. So they'll have days of the week, that is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And they'll have the officers listed. Let's say one of the officers is Officer Smith. Then they'll find out which days of the week is Smith available. So let's say Smith is available for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and has taken off on Saturday and Sunday. Next would be Officer, let's say Fredericks. Let's say he is working on Monday, working on Tuesday, working on Wednesday, working on Thursday, but is taking off on Friday and Saturday, and then again working on Sunday. So this is the workforce schedule, which will help the police department in designating which officer should be assigned to which time of the shift and which days of the week. So at this point, based on the calls that the police department had analyzed, they have already decided how many zones should the town be divided in and how many patrol cars or how many officers should be assigned to each of these zones. and at what shifts. And based on this workforce schedule, the police department now knows which officer is available on which day to be assigned to these shifts. So now the next step is to decide the shift assignments and give the instructions to these officers. So what the police department will do is prepare a document which is called a shift assignment document. So let's see how that can be prepared. So let's say this is the document. Which is known as the shift assignment. Now this assignment document will be prepared for a particular shift. So let's say this is for shift timing 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Now this document will contain the zone, the officer assigned, and then special instructions. So let's say for zone 1A, Officer Smith is being assigned, and the instructions could be that from 10 a.m. to noon time, patrol the beach area. Now this may be coming from the fact that a lot of crime is being reported around this time at the beach area. For zone 1B, let's say Officer Fredericks is assigned, and the special instructions could be between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. patrol the hospital parking lot and reference is car thefts. For zone 1D, let's say Officer Erickson is assigned, and the special instructions are bike patrol in the business district. So this is how a typical shift assignment document will look like. So once the police officer reports into the police department for their shift, they know which zone they have been assigned and what are the special instructions for them. Now let's say that based on the shift assignments, the police officers are performing their routine patrol as shown in this picture. So this police officer is patrolling this area, This police officer is patrolling this area, this one is this area, and so on. These black lines represent the roads. Now suppose there is a crime happening somewhere in this area here. So somebody from this area will call the police department. So let's say the police department is here. Now when the call is received by the police department, they capture the name, the address, phone number, and the type of call. All this information gets captured in the software system that the police department is using. Now, the type of calls could be crimes in progress, heart attacks, past crimes, or other non-emergency calls. Now these type of calls are then prioritized by the police department. For example, the calls for crime in progress and heart attack may be given a higher priority as compared to the calls for past crime and non-emergency calls. Now the systems used by the police department have automatic transponders which allow the person sitting in the police department to view the physical locations of the patrol units in this area. The system also assigns coordinates to the location of each of the patrol units. Now, based on this information, the system then determines the fastest route to reach to the location of crime. So, whether this patrol car can reach to the crime scene faster than this other patrol car. So that gets decided by the software being used by the police department. So after the police department has decided who can reach to the crime scene faster, the person sitting in the police department will send a call to the patrol car closest to the crime scene. So let's say they decide that this car here is the closest to the crime scene and can reach here the fastest. So the police department will make a call to this patrol car here. The police department will then explain the criticality of the call to the police officer, and this patrol car will then be assigned to this crime scene. Now these software systems use techniques like the assignment model, transportation model, etc. to figure out which is the fastest route and which patrol unit can easily reach the crime scene. So in this case study, we have seen three different techniques used by the police department. First is forecasting. This technique helps the police department in determining the number of officers needed for each area or zone by each hour of the day. In this case study, we observed that the police department can do the forecasting based on the analysis of historical data of calls received by them. The second technique is workforce scheduling. This is used in planning the workforce availability during each day of the week. So in this case study, we saw that some officers may be taking off on Saturday and Sunday, or maybe Sunday and Monday, and so on. So preparing a schedule of workforce availability will help in planning which officers should be assigned to which shifts. The third technique is the assignment and transportation models. This is used in determining which patrol unit would be the most appropriate to be assigned to a crime scene. Generally, these mathematical models are embedded within the software systems used by the police departments, which help them in their day-to-day activities.